This is not the first Omegaverse to be published, so just saying that.
Traditionally published?
Yeah, the Fake Mate was published before this.
Is the Fake Mate an Omegaverse?
Yeah, it's more Omegaverse than this, let me tell you.
Okay. Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we will be discussing, analyzing, and reviewing Bride by Ali Hazelwood. Don't forget there's a link below to sign up for our free newsletter for more information and updates about us and the podcast. For more content outside the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter, now X, LitLib Podcast. I'm your co-host Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms.
And I'm your co-host Kristen. You can find me at KRXXTXN on all social media platforms.
Oh, okay, so this book blew up on TikTok when it was announced because it's one of the first Omega books to be traditionally published. Omegaverse?
You said Omegaverse books. It's Omegaverse book.
Oh, Omegaverse books to be traditionally published. Sorry, Kristen.
And
anyway,
for anybody who doesn't know what Omegaverse is, I don't know how well versed you are in the Omegaverse. Personally, I've never read anything Omegaverse. So Omegaverse originated within the fanfiction world, basically, where it kind of introduced like stereotypical like wolf tropes and things like that, where they have like the alpha and omega, betas, like all of that sort of thing, where they're like groups and stuff like follow that hierarchy where like the alpha has the most powers, and a lot of the sexual relationship with like werewolves are also things that are put within the Omegaverse, like things like nodding and fated mates and things like that, where people take popular media and stuff and they fanfictionify it into an Omegaverse retelling where they follow those wolfish dynamics. And it's like borderline
like
furry
archetype. Yeah,
but it's borderline like furry core, I think, is like where the main controversy of it stems.
It does. And for those who don't know who Ali Hazelwood is, she's a #1 New York Times bestseller. She's known for the books Love Theoretically and Love Hypothesis. She usually writes like STEM romance books. She's also written several like peer-reviewed articles about brain science, which is pretty cool.
She's a nerd.
I think that's evident. Like in the book, like you can definitely tell, like in her writing, she's got that like science background. As for controversies surrounding her, she's not a controversial person.
No,
I couldn't find anything of substance. Just that I think it was in 2022. I pulled this from a YouTube video who was talking about this Twitter back and forth, but has since been deleted. So take this with a massive grain or scoop of salt. But I guess her literary agents were giving her tropes to write about, basically like ideas and substance and like inspo. And a lot of authors of color were discussing how their representatives didn't give them that same kind of treatment. So people were just talking about how like the literary community or like the business,
like the agency,
white authors in the same way that they do like authors of color. So something to take into consideration. And she's just really transparent on social media. I think that's what she deleted, because she'll just talk about anything, to my knowledge, about like her writing process, or I don't know. She doesn't seem to be hiding anything. But that's the extent. And then I don't know what it was. I was in the depths of Reddit. I saw that Love Hypothesis was a Raylo fanfic. I don't
understand how you didn't know that. I wish I had my cover. My sister's freaking borrowing my copy of it because I actually bought the physical copy of this whenever I read it back in like 2022. Have you seen the cover to the Love Hypothesis?
I'll look it up
because
on the spot.
I'll put a picture in editing, but
I guess it does look like Adam Driver.
It looks like Adam Driver.
I didn't realize.
And then her hair is like, look up like Ray hair.
Well, she always has like the 3.
She has the
buns,
3 buns,
right?
but that bun is like the middle bun, where it's basically just like, because obviously since it's supposed to be more science fiction-y, Star Wars is, if you look at how like the buns fit on Ray's head, that's how her bun kind of is, where you can easily see that they just cropped out the two.
Like the newer Star Wars movies, so I wouldn't have made that connection unless somebody had like mentioned it.
But I mean, Reylo is a very big fan fiction community. Not that I've ever been a part of it, because I've seen the newer Star Wars movies, but I'm much more of the original trilogy and a little bit of like the first three. Like, they've never been like super big, but I've only seen the newer ones like once through. And lately I've been on a really big like Star Wars fatigue with like The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, and like all of like the Star Wars like lore stuff that comes out. And so I've kind of dropped off watching it, while Tyler watches some of it still, but like half of the stuff we won't watch anymore because it's too much content to consume. You have to like basically have watched all 8 seasons of the Clone Wars, all of like the Rebels, all of these extra things for like the live action shows to make sense to you now, and it's like too much when there's other things to watch and consume that's not just Star Wars. But Rey and Kylo Ren are only popular in like the last 3 movies.
Not my thing.
But it's kind of just like an enemies to lovers trope, but I think they're like cousins or something technically, or like closely related, because like
Ew.
well, because like basically
I'm not getting into the whole
the lore
is
is that like
another time.
Ben Solo, which is Kylo Ren, he is Han Solo and Princess Leia's daughter or son. Sorry, not daughter or gay son. They chose gay son. I'm just kidding. And then Rey is supposed to be like Palpatine's like granddaughter or something. And so there's like basically people are talking about how like technically they could be related because of how like Anakin, the Skywalkers and stuff are from Palpatine. So it's really
Too much.
yeah. But I think people always just assume too that everything that Ali Hazelwood does is basically originally a Reylo fanfiction. Because I was even seeing people say that about this too, which I don't know if I can see the connection where it's just like because it's people that don't like each other at first and then they like each other, which is like the basis of Reylo. And I've only read The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I don't know anything about her other like know enough about
Those
the lore.
who don't, maybe we should like get into the summary of it, so because we're
Oh.
we're talking a lot about, but we haven't like told anyone like what this is who has.
Basically, the summary of Bride is it's a paranormal romance following a vampire who must marry an alpha werewolf. Misery is a mid-20s woman who doesn't fit in because she was raised by humans for 10 years, and she doesn't fit in with the humans because she's a vampire. Being the daughter of a very important vampire councilman, to uphold the alliance between the wares, Misery must marry the were alpha low. Misery has one reason for her to agree to this marriage of convenience, and it's not political or for the alliance. That's basically all of the spiel on the back, basically, because like there is like an overarching mystery that it's pretty surface level in my opinion, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody who even had like an inkling of reading this, because I think overall it is a fun read, even if it's not too serious.
It's kind of like a very light thriller. It's a mystery.
Very lightly. It's more
romance.
focused on the romance than it is, I think, on the thriller mystery part of it, to be honest.
But it's a slow burn romance, and it's
slow
It
burn.
is an enemies to lovers. I saw some people in like the ratings are like, this isn't an enemies to lovers, but like the wares and vampires are very much like they don't fuck with each other, so like that's where the enemies to lovers is coming in.
I can see that, but I also agree, since they are marrying for like an alliance standpoint, that's not really enemies to lovers, and they don't really have any like bad blood with each other personally either. But I mean, it's kind of follows just like your stereotypical tropes. I mean, I feel like it's very Ali Hazelwood. I mean, I've only read The Love Hypothesis, but I mean, I read The Love Hypothesis in like one day. This one's a super quick read too. Just if you're looking for something like no thought, head empty book, I think this is really easy for you to do.
Pretty good reviews on Goodreads. It has 1.6 stars.
4.6 stars.
Reviews.
Yeah, say that again.
4.6 stars on
You
Goodreads
said
with over 100,000 views.
It's
That'd be funny.
Loved book with 1.6 stars. Yeah, it's really popular, and I know a lot of people on Book Talk are really enjoying it too, which I don't think it's definitely not the worst thing I think Book Talk has popularized. I think I ended up giving it 3.75 stars, and Mariah rated it much higher than that.
I did. I didn't rate it for like, I don't know, it's like an enjoyable read. It wasn't anything
I wasn't bored.
dislike.
Yeah.
I wasn't bored. I liked the overall pacing of the book. It was just, I wish there was like maybe like a dual point of view, or like I think that would have
I think
made it
getting Lo's
more
perspective would have
interesting.
been definitely well, because all of the little like thingies at the top of the chapter, all you get from his. I
Yeah,
don't know
and
what those
like
are called.
when it comes to monster romance, because I have read quite a few monster romances, like this one ranks really high. I think it was very well done. I like the science aspect to like
They talk
the
about like the
wares and the
breeding and
vampires,
like how that would work, and like there's a lot of
like genetic makeup,
yeah.
and that's so different than you see in like your stereotypical like monster smut, monster romance. It just felt a lot more thought through, developed. It wasn't just a Wattpad copy paste and being sold on like KU. It did have some good intention behind it, so I really enjoyed it for what it was.
I wonder
Like
if
I would
that
recommend this to people because it's like even with the whole nodding, that's like a whole separate conversation we'll get into. Like it really isn't. I don't know. It's not that
it's not
out there,
it's
and it's
not
something contemporary romance readers could enjoy.
yeah, it's not like super like so in depth into like monster romance where it's like a dragon with two penises while also sticking a tail up inside of her while also like doing multiple things. It's nothing like
You
I
had
feel
to be
like
there.
out of the ordinary. That I feel like because like even though Lo is like a werewolf, they never do it in the werewolf form, so it's still two humanoid creatures. And then also, I think what's different about this is that even though Misery is a vampire, she's still also considered a monster versus I think typical monster romance, alien romance. Usually it's a female woman, and then the male is a being or a creature.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. Not that I think the vampire anatomy is supposed to be very different than a regular human, but at least she's got more quirks because she does have to drink blood and she has like thralling abilities and like that.
Now we can get into the criticisms from reviewers. I went into the depths of the 1-star reviews, and some of them were really interesting. I kept seeing people talk about how it was too political.
That is the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. This book's politics are so lackluster.
There really isn't much substance to the politics of it. I was very surprised that people were critiquing it so hard, but maybe because it's more mainstream, and she does talk about it more than I suppose like most like mainstream like romance writers. So like there is something there, but it's like no babble.
Yeah.
It's
like
just
I think there's even less like
normal.
politics discussions than like the Crescent City series by SJM.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Like, all you really get is like kind of an understanding of the hierarchies of the humans, the vampires, and the wares. Like, you get like this very like rudimentary understanding of like their world, which their world does take place in like
Modern
normal Earth.
Yeah.
Like,
They just have different like lands, I guess. Like their
like
countries
California is still there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. People were also critiquing the lack of world building. It's in Earth, like it's modern Earth.
Yeah,
They have
like
technology. I don't know what world building this isn't. A high fantasy.
she just wanted to
don't know,
write
I don't
about a
get it.
vampire and a werewolf fucking. That was the thing to that, and I don't think it's supposed to be anything really deeper than that. And I feel like if you're trying to overly critique something for that, you can't really do that because it's not what it was trying to be. It wasn't trying to be a high fantasy political commentary on society. This was just, I think you can explicitly tell if you read this, it was just Ali Hazelwood wanted to write about a werewolf and a vampire fucking. Like, that is the core of what this is, I think. And I think that's what Ali Hazelwood does so well, is the romance part of it, because that's the only thing that I felt, like, mostly intrigued by, that I fully, like, accepted. Everything else I felt like was background information. And I think that's how you have to take this book. If that's what you want in a book, you'll appreciate it.
It almost seems like when people comment that they want like a fade to black, because I feel like you can't. I don't know if you can have this like immense world building and also like.
I mean, it's not a long book.
No, it's really short.
It's
well,
not
like
I
super
think
short.
it's like it's like yeah,
something?
it's like almost 400 pages, I think, with like the acknowledgement and stuff, and it ends up being 400 pages, which for a fantasy that is unheard of, you know? Like,
so I don't know. I feel like it sits better in like the supernatural romance. It's definitely not a fantasy in my head. Like that's just where it's gonna sit.
Just because it has fantastical characters doesn't make a book a fantasy, and that's why I mean, if I was rating this as a fantasy, I'd probably give it like a 2.5 stars or something like that. But I didn't rate it as a fantasy. I rated it as a contemporary romance that I enjoyed, which is why I got 3.75, which some people view anything with a 3 stars not good, but I think it's fine.
Great.
I think it is what it is. I didn't expect more. I didn't get more. And like, I think that is probably the highest I will ever rate a like strictly romance book is probably 4 stars, because that's just not like my genre. I think, and I have my own critiques like within the romance genre and stuff like that, where I think I prefer something that is very much slow burn, where people are saying this is a slow burn. For me, I felt like it was still very fast. Like, I think they did have like some adequate tension and stuff like that, but they didn't have any like conflict or anything that I would have preferred it to have fully. If it did have that, I might have rated it higher, but it's very much straight, just like, this is a romance. They're going to get together in the end. You know that.
Okay, but we need to preface this. Kristen's idea of a slow romance is like Anastasia.
Yeah, where they're not fucking till page 600.
Like 800 or 900 pages. I think that's normal. I'm gonna be honest. I think you're the outlier in this situation.
Comparing, if the people that are reading this are fan fiction girlies, I think they would be on the same page as me. Because, like, look at, like, Manacled and the chokehold that has on, like, the book talk community. Do you know how long that fucking book is? Yeah, it's like 500,000 words. It is insanely long. And they don't be fucking either like that. You know, I think a lot more people, at least like within like the online community, and maybe it's my generation too, the younger people, I think, yearn for a true slow burn. And I'm sure this is great pacing for some people, but I just don't think the payoff is as there, since it's only so many 100 pages.
I think you're landing into a no true Scotsman logical fallacy. Thank you very much. Gonna go back to my debate bro origins, my villain arc, but we can agree to disagree on this subject.
But I mean, I think that's something where if you find yourself someone similar to me and you don't like, if you want them to have so much tension and they don't even touch hands until like page 500, this book probably won't be for you. That's all I'm saying.
And then there's somebody who's like a millennial who, I don't know, I read Twilight and stuff like that. I think is a slow burn.
Okay.
Like, the extreme version, right?
I feel like the only reason why it can be a slow burn is because of New Moon. If New Moon wasn't there, it'd be boring. Because you need the tension of Edward leaving for a whole fucking book. They're right there where your ball is, the black ball.
But I think like Kate Roberts, any of their books as slow burns. No, those are fast paced. We're quick. We're burning. I think Karina Halley's like Blood Orange, Black Rose. I think that's like in the middle. I think this is a slower burn. So it just depends on which, I guess, mindset you're coming from.
Yeah. Or like what you prefer. Because like, I think this could be a slow burn if you are comparing it to regular like average monster romance or whatever. Like if you're looking at like Kate Roberts and things like that, like the head of like monster romance and things like that. But I think most people who are looking for slow burn or like subscribe to slow burn, I don't think they would describe this as slow burn. The true slow burn enjoyers need to rise up and popularize actual slow burn.
For debate, how are we defining slow burn? Because usually I see a lot of controversy over like smut ratings, but I don't ever see anyone talking about like what quantifies a slow burn, because everyone has such different definitions. Well, so perhaps we will take this as a clip and post it on TikTok. Please let me know, what is your definition of a slow burn? Give me a book. I want to know your examples. Give me a thesis.
Anastasia, Nikolai and Zoya, and the King of Scars duology. I'd even go as far to say is that even though Kane and Nina, I would not classify them as a slow burn because they only met in King of Scars, versus if they would have met. You think Nikolai and Zoya met in the fucking second book? The second Shadow and Bone book. We went through 1, 2, 3 books that are just their main characters in, not even including whenever they showed up in Crooked Kingdom. They are like the perfect slow burn, but I think that's also because whenever I think slow burn is always done more effectively whenever romance is a subplot, not the main plot. as well, because you have so many other things to focus on where you're also like thinking about the That's why I think I'm excited for the Cruel Prince, because I know I think it's gonna be what I want.
Yeah, you're probably gonna love it, and I'm gonna fucking hate it and want to DNF it the whole time.
It's young adults, so they're not fucking, so you better get that out of your head.
Well, why would I read it?
Because it's very political, apparently. That's a lot of people's complaints, is that because it's entirely political and the romance is very much a subplot. Anyways.
Shall we get into the spoilers?
Yeah, we can go into the spoilers.
I don't know where we're at.
I think we should discuss the collateral system, because I feel like that's the only, like, political thing you get any of.
Even, like, the whole, like, the storyline with Serena, I don't think that's, like, relevant to discuss. I don't know. Like,
I think it's
like,
so weak
doing it, but it's not.
I think that part of the story is so weak, and that's like one of the things that like not enjoy this as much.
Amount to anything, which I guess I wouldn't expect it to amount to something big, because it couldn't, because the story's so short. Like, there's no way.
I feel like there's too much going on in a short amount of time, where Serena's story was almost just there to move the plot along, I guess.
And then possibly open it up to a secondary spin-off novel.
Yeah, I definitely could see it. Especially with how well Bride's doing, writing Serena and whatever that fucking dude's name is.
Cohen?
Yeah, is that how you say it?
That's how in my head I was saying it, Cohen.
Cohen. Okay. And he's supposed to be like, old.
Maybe we can talk about the general politics.
Okay.
Of this. And then we can segue it to just, I don't know. We'll just see where we get with that. We could set it like, let's try to spend like...
because I put my 2 quotes in that those are the only 2 quotes that I felt like were very political, were the most politically charged quotes within this whole book, and I don't even think they were very politically charged, and like, any ways that can be related to like modern politics. So there's this one quote where I think what is her dad's name? What is Misery's dad's name? I don't know what his name is. She just calls him father all the time.
You can just say Misery's father.
Okay. Well, so I have this quote until the end, which even then is like... Anyways, so there's this quote that I felt like can be kind of relevant to discuss. There's 2 quotes that I feel like are the most political, that I felt that, like, I guess at these 2 lines being in your book makes you writing a political monster romance. Then I guess this is what makes... Right, Kaz's food went off. I don't know what that went through. But if this is like, these 2 quotes are what makes your book too political, then I don't know where we're going as a society. But the first quote is a conversation that Misery is having with her father, whatever his name is. And her father goes, "The humans had an election. I had no idea," but she says, "Wonder what that's like. A leadership structure that's not an unattainable council whose membership is restricted to a handful of families passed down from generation to generation, like a chip China set." Where basically, I guess, Misery is just saying that because the humans have an electoral structure, that means that there's not corruption or like a ladder of succession in ways, whenever I would argue that just because we have the illusions of elections, at least here in the United States is still very much a dynasty families, because you think about the people who can afford to go into politics are, one, already rich people, because you have to be able to afford your campaign, afford the people that work for you and spread your propaganda or your words and things like that. So you already have to have some type of wealth or be able to afford a college and be able to get like a political science degree and make those connections and like that. And then also, we've had multiple presidents that are father-son relations, like John Adams and then John Quincy Adams, the 2nd president, and then the 4th or 5th president, father-son right there. Most recently, we've had the Bushes, George H.W. Bush and then George W. Bush, our father and son. We had, and then we have people like the Clintons, which is like a husband and wife situation where Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in 2020 or 2016, I think is whenever she ran. And so we have very much like dynasties within America where you're saying that it's not restricted to a handful of families, when that's a bunch of families right there that it's restricted to. And the nepotism within being in government, you immediately have, like, look at the fucking Kennedys. There's, like, always a fucking Kennedy running for president, left, right. Every fucking year, I swear, there's always some Kennedy running for president. That's literally a dynasty family of government employees.
I think you start to see, like, Ali Hazelwood's politics, which aren't much of anything. Like, she seems like a liberal, like a pretty run-of-the-mill liberal. Like, there's nothing of substance, because outside of this quote, she has another quote that we'll get to later that it kind of is more indicative, but giving this false illusion of democracy being better than like the monarchy system or dynasty that they have amongst the vampires. Again, like as Kristen was saying, we do not live in a democracy. We do not live in
We live
have
in
a
an
bourgeois
oligarchy.
democracy.
We live in an
That is what is
oligarchy.
happening. We can't talk about that. We have gerrymandering. We have a lot of voter suppression. Felons cannot vote.
So many
Like,
people
we have so
cannot
many
vote.
barriers to voting and participating in our elections, and we don't have a direct democracy by any means. Like, we have to vote for representatives, and the representatives have to then like take the people's wants to like the higher ups. Like, it's very frustrating to like when I read that, and it's like, what do you mean? And I understand like perhaps that doesn't play into her world. Like, maybe the humans have abolished like I don't fucking know what they abolished. They did something different than what we got. They got democracy,
yeah,
like a true democracy,
allegedly,
like by working class peoples, but it's not.
Well, because
so I can understand that critique in world building, but we're coming from the position of Marxist, not just like, oh, it's a fantasy. Like, this is you can't discuss politics and then it not be accurate. It's frustrating because she has a PhD, and I know she took some like humanities to get her degree. So it's like, where shine through.
Well, because like one of the things too is that you look at like the South of the United States of America. The South is the most like populous with black people and things like that. But then these are also the states that are overwhelmingly Republican because there's obvious voter suppression where black people don't have the same rights to vote and things like that, where they don't have the same access and things like that. Like, why is Alabama and Georgia the most red states but then also have the most black people in them? There's a reason why that is because like the way that Republicans specifically build their districts and states to keep it that way, and then acting like that the US has like a fair election system, I think is completely nonsensical at that point. And like,
it's just like trying to like, if we get into like the conversation about like the electoral college system and how it's like frustrating, and obviously this is not something that Ali would put into this book. It's not long enough for her to like dissect it, but just even the insinuation that what the humans have going on is like better, I would fundamentally disagree. Even though they're acting like humans are the more like oppressed species, even though they are able to like better like reproduce and populate.
Yeah, well, because
was
like
a very loose theme throughout the book, and I didn't.
Well, because I think in the end you're supposed to find out basically that the vampires are actually the weaker ones because they don't have the numbers and they don't have the powers, where at least like humans have the numbers on their side, where they have more people that would be able to die against if there was an all-out war between like the vampires and the humans, which is why the vampires allied themselves with the humans. And then that we can go in talking about like the collateral system that they have to basically keep the humans and the vampires like fair with each other, which is already a flawed system within
like,
themselves.
US politics, it's the checks and balances,
yeah,
so to speak, of the whole society.
Which I honestly,
North America, I don't think it pertains to the whole globe, because they talk about it later how like they don't do the collateral system in like Europe or something. Like everyone kind of like lives harmoniously, but in like the United States, in Ali Hazelwood's book, they have the collateral system,
which I don't even know how deep the collateral system goes, because like they say that these people that they're just doing the collateral system with is like a councilman and a councilwoman, and I don't even know like what council they're part of, if they're like Senate, House of Representatives, city based, state based, like even how deep it goes and things like that. And not to mention one of the main themes that like the villain of Misery's father being like, oh, like the cost, basically that like one sacrifice can be worth like the overall good for like the vampires, and like the ends justify the means sort of perspective that I think but that's how like the father acts, is like the ends justify the means.
Accelerationist.
Yes.
The idea that he
has where like, but the thing is that like if you really believed that, then like whenever like they do a collateral system, I don't know, the vampires are so obsessed with the collateral system. If they wanted like the humans to go to war like with the werewolves and stuff like that, they would have done like this fake marriage sooner and then just killed the werewolf person, to have the humans and the vampires go to war against the werewolves earlier. Like, it's all just
But,
like evil
essentially the vampires
mustache.
are like almost like eugenicists, but they want to create like their own like vampiric ethno state,
But they're also
and
like they can't have like children at the rate. Like they're like it's
but they
apparently
won't
really
let
hard
them
to
love and like create bonds with one another because like the
it's only
priority is to
breeding.
reproduce themselves with themselves.
Yeah.
And that's like a really, I don't know how I feel about that, like after like reading it, like having that a theme. I know he's a villain, but
Yeah.
he's kind of just giving fash.
But it's not even
Like,
like he's like
literal
a
idea of
villain.
fash.
It's just like a twisty mustache, like here are all my evil plans that will never be actually able to happen because like he says these things, but he never like inherently has these plans to do anything about it.
No, you think he has them, but he really doesn't.
Like his only idea is to keep him in power. That's it. That's all it is. And then she's like, you will sacrifice anybody to get what you want and stuff like that. And it's like, will you? And then like another overarching like thing they mention is, I can't remember what they call it, but there's like basically a couple centuries ago there was another marriage between the werewolves and the vampires and things like that, but then that caused an all-out war between the vampires and the werewolves because the vampire killed his werewolf wife or something like that. I don't know the exact word. It's never like fully in depth and things like that.
But you don't know because there's like a distortion of history that's being taught.
Because the vampires are taught one way, and then the werewolves are taught one way, and then the human that like is talking about it with them is like, "Oh, are you guys gonna fight about it?" And they're like, "No, we're above all that." Where it's like, okay, but you actually don't know like what your actual history is, and you think if you combined like your truths and like talked it through, then you could maybe like, oh, this is actually probably what happened, and then that could be like a whole nother like talking about like the propaganda that your people spread. Because I feel like in the way it's like all of the vampires are like villainized whenever you don't know anything about like what the other vampires have power to do. Because I know like Owen, which is Misery's brother, she critiques like, oh, like all of the other councilmen act like they didn't know what was going on with our father and like what he was doing like that. But it's like this man seemed to have absolute power pretty much. Like, was there actually a vote within this vampire world or anything like that, or were they just like, was it all surface level? Like, I don't know. They don't discuss that.
We can move on to the next liberal quote that you highlight.
Yeah.
These are like the only quotes I remembered that I was gonna mention.
Yeah, well, because the other ones were all like, they were not like politics based, but this is whenever Misery's having like a flashback to talking to her human friend Serena, and this is just like they grew up like sisters because she was in the collateral system where she had to live for 10 years from the ages 8 to 18 because basically for her father to hold the alliance with the human people, where the humans got a vampire child, which is Misery, and then the vampires got a human child that basically if somebody did something wrong, you would kill the child, and then that would start war, which is like already a flawed like idea within itself. Like just killing one child is gonna mean that you're going to war because the child has to be important to like the head council person or whatever. But it's like, okay. But then she basically, because she was such a weirdo and stuff like that, and the humans didn't know how to take care of her, they like basically adopted another girl that had no family to basically befriend Misery as a child so that she could kind of be less rebellious and be more normal and have proper socialization. So then they end up becoming friends, they feel like sisters and things like that. But then they're having this debate where they go, hey, where they're talking about like whether or not Misery should drink from people and like kill people and drink from them like that. And then she like talks about like, oh, like just because I'm a vampire doesn't mean I do that like the humans. And then she goes, hey, I'm human. And she goes, humans kill all the time. Yeah, but indirectly by making health insurance too expensive or stubbornly opposing gun control, which is so weird because like stubbornly opposing gun control and then also saying indirectly, I feel like is an oxymoron. Because like if you're gonna talk about like because the reason why that there's so many mass shootings and stuff like that is because we don't have gun control, but then they're opposing gun control, so then the guns aren't directly killing people, then like what are you saying is not direct about the killing? Because that's not even including like the imperial state of the United States of America going to other foreign countries and directly dropping bombs on like Iraq or Gaza or any other places in the Middle East that the United States wants their resources from.
See, that's like where like the world building as a Marxist doesn't really make any sense because again, this is supposed to be based in the United States, and it seems to be playing along with the same rules where we have like mass shootings, and mass shootings are largely a result of white supremacy. So that is relevant, right, in this world. And then the same with like the healthcare crises. That means we have like lobbyists and like
Mm-hmm.
the big pharma. So
Yeah.
the humans, the democracy is not a real democracy. This is circling back to like our original point. It is exactly what we had said. She proved the point with this liberal mindset that it's just
Not actually like
it's
you.
frustrating. It's so frustrating. It's not guns. Guns are not the problem.
Yeah, not even
Jesus
it.
Christ.
Like, and that's one thing that I think that like just shows that like liberals can see the point. They just like choose to ignore it or something, because it's like you're saying that because of like lobbyists and like the laws that are passed, that it's indirect, that health insurance is too expensive, which is why we have so many people like going into medical debt and stuff like that, because that's like the leading cause of debt is medical debt and like homelessness and things like that. But it's indirect, even though I don't understand how that makes something indirect whenever it still actively results in the death of somebody. Just because you're not stabbing them in the neck makes it not direct murder, even though opposing gun control, guns are having access to guns is what causes the mass shootings in your liberal mind. Is like, that's what this gun control like line means to me. And so then what are people doing with the guns if that's not direct killing? Or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that just seems like such a missing logic to me.
And I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional. I don't know if that's like how Ali Hazelwood wanted like Serena's character to be, and like as she like grows, even though we don't really get a lot of character development from her until the end,
Not
and
even then.
she's kind of just like a background thought, even though she's supposed to be like a motivator for the storyline to progress. It's very confusing.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
This is liberal brain rot for you. Is like these little quotes.
But
And you wouldn't think that this fucking book about werewolves and vampires would have any substance to it, that we would even want to like make an episode. I did not think there was going to be enough substance to like record an episode, if I'm being frank, until we got to these lines. I was like, oh, well.
Well, it's like, I feel like the politics is about on par with, I would say, like Masters of Death and things like that, where at least Masters of Death was at least a little bit more like, I would say, like dim sock, because like they did explicitly say like eat the rich, and the reason why we're having problems is because of capitalism and things like that. While this is just like, oh, because we have conservatives in power, that's why it's like this sort of thing.
To do like a tier ranking of like politics and like like book talk books, like
yeah,
where they rank.
But I think this is probably has the same amount of like politic mentions, I would say, except for the fact that versus Masters of Death, I think Masters of Death does it better because it's not trying to focus too much on the world or political alliances and things like that. While like the whole reason why they're getting married is like a marriage of convenience, which is an inherently political trope, but then you're going to completely ignore like the politics that is supposed to be like happening in the background because of this marriage being successful. So it's just silly to me. Like, it's just like a silly sort of fake. Mariah totally guessed the ending, I guess. You kind of, because like we kind of had theories too without like the mystery about like Anna having the same. I don't even know if they have the same werewolf dad or like, which is
that was just like a red herring. It's like, oh, possibly they might like,
but they're both half like, werewolves, half humans or whatever is like the twist, which is like fine. And then like
the different species can mix.
Yeah. But we don't even know anything about like vampires and humans mixing. Like, what happens whenever they have a child? They should be doing some experiments with that, because that could be beneficial to the vampires. And then you could really have this Zootopia land where all of the species live together in harmony because they can all actually breed.
It's just the overall, like, it's not a bad book. It's just not.
Mariah enjoyed it. I mean, Mariah gave it a high rating.
Like, I thought it was fun, but like the politics and whatnot are like frustrating. And I think because I'm coming from the perspective of reading a lot of really bad monster romances.
As a monster romance, this is high. As a political book, it is low. You know?
No, I would rate it like a solid 3-star for like a political book, I guess. Like, it's fine, maybe even less, like a 2.5.
Yeah.
But I also rate Orwell pretty. He's like a 1.5.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I guess this is better than George Orwell, because Ali Hazelwood hasn't snitched on any communist yet, I guess.
So true. What else? I mean, that's basically it. Like, I don't even know if it's worth it. We kind of already talked about like fanfic in the beginning, and
I mean, you're the one that consumes all that monster romance. This is probably the second monster romance book I've ever read.
well, and it does seem like people who gravitate towards these, and I do hope that the transition away from dark romance as a genre, it goes towards monster romance, because monster romance, like the monsters are generally like the golden retriever guys, like they're not toxic. Like a lot of dark romance makes me very concerned, and especially when I see the younger folk, younger ladies picking these up and reading them like in high school, like Icebreakers or the Den of Vipers or
I don't think
whatever.
Icebreaker is dark, though. It's just dirty.
Is it?
No, I don't think it's toxic. I think they actually have a really healthy relationship. Like, apparently they talk about going to therapy and stuff all the time. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so maybe not that one.
But I just know it's
like,
supposed to be really,
ritual
it's like
or-
raunchy. Like, it's like dirty. And so it's like, children in middle school, should they really be reading? Like, obviously, like, it's different
the
whenever.
one.
But the thing is, it's not like my thing. Like, I have a whole, like, opinion on whether or not, like, kids in middle school should be reading smut and things like that, because I know whenever I was in middle school, I was definitely not reading what would be like I would consider like middle school appropriate. But it's different whenever your parent is giving you professionally published sex books that are like the main goal is to like portray people having sex and like romance and relationships, where your parent directly like approves of you reading that versus you reading that on like AO3 or the dark web, or like where like not like the dark web, but like, you know, like where you know you're not supposed to be consuming it, so it's taboo for you and it's only like a you thing, versus popularizing it. And then like people have been talking about like girls in 5th grade having Icebreaker on their desk reading. It's like, you as a 5th grader should not be reading about sex.
Know about that. Like, you should exist in social media to know that that is a book to read that's a romance. Because I remember reading, like, I did like this series of unfortunate events, Spiderwick, whatnot. That was like elementary school, middle school. It was like marked, Blue Buds, Twilight. Like those were really popular, like romance. Even marked is like the whole like PC cast, like House of Night series.
I don't know. Tyler talks about that as like
a lot.
Yeah.
For middle school, I was so surprised. And then high school, I mean, that's like when 50 Shades of Grey came out. Like, kids know what sex is. Yes. I think by the time you're in high school, it's gonna happen. Like, people know what, like, porn is.
But middle school, I feel like you, as, like, a middle schooler, you're not going to be reading age-appropriate things if you're reading, like, smut and sex, because you are in middle school. You're not going to be reading about children having sex, because that's fucking creepy, for one. But then you're also not going to have, you shouldn't be reading adults having sex and stuff, because there's a completely different dynamic and things like that, where, like, these people are supposed to be emotionally mature, actually mature, and things like that, where they're going to have different anatomies and physiologies and things like that you don't have as, like, a 5th or 6th grader in school, you know? Like, you don't have developed breasts in 6th grade. You don't have, like, you're usually just starting puberty and things like that, so obviously that's why, like, they end up being interested in those things. But I don't feel like they're positive things for younger people, especially if they end up reading something like Haunting Adeline. Right? I don't think anybody under the age of 18 should even be reading that. I wish I didn't even read that as someone. I read it over the age of 21. It was uncomfortable to read, you know?
I think that's why, like, romanticies, I'm not gonna call Six of Crows a romantasy, but like there is a romance in it. Like, it's a fantasy with a romance element.
Yes.
Sorry.
Subplot.
Let me redact my statement.
Romance
anyway,
subplot.
That is something that is more effective. There is like
you can
like
have romance romance subplot and like background, but I don't think that children should be reading like sex books. Like Bride, I think, is like something that I would not recommend to anybody like under 14. I would say like 15 and above should read Bride and be okay with, like, because especially like the whole nodding situation, which is like its own weird thing and things like that.
If you are somebody that hasn't taken like a sex education class and you don't know about anatomy, you probably shouldn't read anything that has explicitive content. I don't think you should get your anatomy lesson from something like this.
Yes, and then also
like it doesn't, I don't know. It feels weird, like, being an adult, like, talking about this. And I know this is, like, something I'll have to discuss with, like, my own children. Like, eventually it's going to get to a point. But I don't know that.
Like, there's a certain age.
16 and up.
Yeah.
Maybe. I feel like 16.
I could see, like, 14 or 15. because I know, like, even though, like, whenever I was, like, 12, 13, I was reading inappropriate things online, but it's not something that, like, my librarian was handing me or my mom was handing me, versus now, I see a lot of young girls on TikTok reading things like that, and their parents are buying these books for them, like, fully endorsing that they read these, because they don't know the content that's in them, but that doesn't make it okay for them to read it, because then they feel like, at least socialize, it's going to be something completely different to talk about than, oh, I'm reading this on my phone while at school, sort of thing, you know? Where it's, like, personal to you, where nobody else is seeing what you're doing on your personal phone, versus you have a book, you whip out Icebreaker, people are know you're reading a fucking scene, like a sex scene, you know?
You know what? My niece is supposed to be here, I think today. We're driving up. She's 12, turning 13 soon. I'm gonna ask her when I see her if, like, what kind of books like kids her age read.
Yeah,
when I
what
see
she
her.
sees
And I'll
people
let you
reading.
know.
Yeah, I
Like,
just
I'm
see. I
curious.
mean, this is
She
only
lives
on
in
like
Texas normally.
on TikTok. I've been seeing people talking about like seeing kids read this. I haven't personally seen this, but I'm also not around that many like girls that are at that age of reading. Like, I'm a nanny and I watch 2 little boys that obviously are not going to be reading anything that's like
Minecraft, Roblox.
yeah, like the one of the little boys I watch, he got like the Pokemon like handbook or whatever and is reading that. Like, it's not like anything like crazy, but I also don't know. Like, my sister, she read Ugly Love whenever she was like 15 or 16, I think, and I'm like, that's not something that like you should publicly be showing people that you read, you know? I feel like that's something that like
Be offering commentaries.
bring back
because,
shame.
We also have like the younger girls who are like going like 10, 11, 12 who are asking for like retinols, the drunk elephant retinols, anti-aging. They're very grown.
I understand,
I
like,
don't know why.
I understand the want of acting grown, because I remember I being younger, I was like, oh, I can't wait till I turn 16 so that I can drive and be on my own. I can't wait till I turn 18 so I can get my own house and live on my own, blah, blah, blah. Which is just really sad, but I think that's a lot of how, like, at least, like, being an older daughter within a family and stuff like that, because I was tasked a lot with like watching my younger siblings and stuff on weekends and things like that, where I didn't want that responsibility. I didn't ask for that responsibility either, because I didn't ask my mom to have more kids or anything like that, but I had to end up inevitably babysitting every day, every weekend, and after work until she got home from work every day. And so I feel like you always have that want to grow up to not have those same responsibilities, but then you end up having different responsibilities, and so ways that you could feel grown up without actually like changing your responsibilities is just doing things that you see other adults do around you, which is like the drunk elephant, the retinol, reading smutty books.
Try to come up with like an age appropriate romance guide that we would recommend to like younger folks, or like parents who want to like their kids want to read and they want to read these dark romances, so maybe we can try to find like a nice medium that we've read, because I know we were big readers. We've read a lot of things.
But it's also too, I think that's something like, I mean, the Percy Jackson has a great romance subplot, even not that I support like the author in any way and what his statements on Palestine and stuff are, but I think it's really hard now if you're looking for something that does have a romance, because I mean, young girls like romance. They'll watch like a movie, like a Disney princess movie. Those are romance movies in the end, where they end up marrying the prince and things like that. But I think that's like what a lot of young girls see, but it's also hard because like everything is written by adults nowadays. There's not much like media written by children for children, or written by younger or like teenagers written for teenagers. And I don't know if that's something that like if the publishing industry changed, if that would be helpful in any way, because then at least people within that audience could relate to that. Because I feel like that's one thing that at least like I know whenever I was in middle and high school, I was big into fan fiction and stuff, because a lot of people that wrote the fan fiction that I read were people around my age that had the same interests as me and things like that. And I think you can definitely tell whenever something is written by someone closer to your age, because you can more directly relate with how they write the characters, where they're not writing them like super millennial and cringy in ways, you know? No offense to you, but like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so.
But I think with this traditionally, I think with the constant trend of traditionally with like, what the fuck is that?
Ringo.
Oh.
Snack.
I think with fan fiction becoming more normalized and more traditionally published, I think that gives younger people maybe the opportunity to write things for younger people, where that could possibly be something that's more age appropriate for them, because they are already discussing. If someone your age is writing something, they're probably already discussing it with you or with your friends and things like that, versus adults not knowing what's going on in their kids' lives because they don't know what goes on in their kids' lives. I feel like even you could be a pretty present parent, but you know your kid is always doing stuff behind your back that you're never gonna know about. And that's a whole parenting debate and things that are like, I know my kid, you know your kid, and how they are to you. Everyone acts different to someone else, you know?
That's
Yeah.
for damn sure.
But I guess if that's all, anything else? Yeah, we'll do monthly, like, special monthly posts where you can get more insight into each of our lives and what we're reading and what we're doing independently. And then also, what are we doing next? Book.
Ring Shout.
Oh, Ring Shout. So that will be on March 24th, I think. Oh, just kidding. That's April 4th. Ring Shout will be out. Yeah, April 4th, Ring Shout will be posted. So check out Ring Shout if you haven't. Mariah's got it right there behind her. You're blocking it, but I think this one is what genre is it again?
I think it's speculative fiction.
Speculative fiction. That actually has more political substance than this book is, so something that'll be,
And it was pretty good. I said I started it, and it's really good so far, so I think it's gonna be a really positive episode.
And that is all. Goodbye.